What is going on, everybody? Welcome to our very last divisional draft grades video. And bittersweet, this will tie a ribbon on a phenomenal 2026 NFL draft season. Just want to thank all of you for the views, the support, the super chats, signing up on Patreon for the draft guide and the exclusive content, all of it. This wraps up another phenomenal draft season on the content. Could not do it without you guys. I feel very thankful. So thank you. As we get started with the AFC South here, if you could please take a second to hit that like button. It really helps me out. And do make sure you're subscribed because my deep dive team preview series is just around the corner here. Probably looking about 10 days or so-ish, maybe, for that first reveal of the number 32 team in the series. But very much looking forward to that. But let's go ahead and get started breaking down the draft for the Houston Texans here. Not my favorite start to their draft as they actually trade up and then, in my opinion, reach on a player I did like in Keelan Rutledge. Now, I am happy to see them address the offensive line. I think Rutledge can be a good player for them and hopefully get that line in a better direction in time for where they want to go. I mean, they brought in a bunch of veteran pieces and they do look at the future there and they're like, we need to secure this thing long term. And I always have a hard time like being harsh on a team for drafting an offensive lineman, but this was early for the player, for how I saw Keelan Rutledge, if I'm going to be honest about it and stay true to my evaluations. I had him as I think the 64th player on my big board, kind of a late 2, early 3 type of range. I am worried about his pass protection translating to the next level. And I just taking a guard in the first round where I have questions about him being a plus pass blocker. That's just, early for that type of prospect. Now, I love his run blocking, tested super well. He's great. He's a great explosive athlete in a straight line and in, gap style runs. This dude can get on the move and pull, and he has that dickhead mentality you look for. I don't do a ton of offensive line comps, but he does remind me a lot of Wyatt Teller, just where his strengths and weaknesses are. That big, wide, like massive, like ridiculously massive upper body. And Wyatt Teller was brought in here for the Texans. I would expect with them liking this style of lineman, we could see a lot of pin and pull and gap style runs this year with the Texans in front of David Montgomery. So they're gonna bring the hammer. They're gonna be a more physical run game, but they also had a lot of issues keeping, protecting CJ Stroud and their passing game has had a lot of issues because of that. So I don't know that this necessarily fixes that a ton. And I don't like truly hate the pick, but I do have to be critical of the value, especially as they trade up for this guy. I know some other teams, there's a lot of noise about Keelan Rutledge going earlier, but I don't know that necessarily justifies you taking a guy that, for me, has some question marks. And we are standing by my own evals as we give these grades, and now we just get to see how he develops and turns out in the league. But I went C- on that one, and otherwise C-graded pick that gets another slight ding for trading up for the player. But then they do trade up again at the top of the second round, and I like this one a good bit better from a process and value standpoint. They get Caden McDonald there. Hell yeah, man. I mean, you already have the best defense in the NFL. That the biggest strength of this defense is the pass rush. They have a very good run defense, but if you could help this become a great run defense, get you into those terrifying third and long situations even more against Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, that's going to bring some value to this team. And Caden McDonald is going to help you get your pass rush packages on the field, get you into 3rd and 9 situations, stop the run on early downs, open up lanes for, these heat-seeking linebackers that they have behind them. They just extended Azeez Al-Shaair, for example. I think it's a ton of fun how he fits into that defense, and it gets another body in there. Like, I do have questions about like Sheldon Rankins holding up long term. I think the least amount of dirty work you can ask Sheldon Rankins to do, the better chance you're going to be able to get to January with him healthy and fresh. And he's underrated when he's able to get after the QB. So that's kind of a sneaky thing I like about this. But yeah, deepens the rotation, gives them a little bit of something they don't have on that defensive line. And I gave that pick an A. I love being aggressive to come get this player into this defense. But then I've got to be critical again, man, quite critical. I actually give this pick an F. Marlon Klein, the tight end out of Michigan in the second round. Wow, I did watch Marlon Klein. Certainly did not see this, man. He was ultimately my number 14 tight end, and he ends up, let's see, did he go before Borkercher? No, he goes after Borkercher. I think he ends up the 4th tight end drafted here, unless I'm forgetting someone, because I think it was Stowers was second after, obviously, Sadiq in the 1st, and I think Borkercher was 3rd. And then here, yeah, we have Klein goes as the 4th tight end off the board. So like the amount of tight ends that I definitely just preferred to Marlon Klein from what I watched. There's literally 10 of them. We saw Max Clare go a few picks later. That's a total head scratcher for me because both those guys are built about the same, about 6'5", about 200, just short of 250 pounds. So not like the biggest guys. But neither of them like dominant blockers. I think Klein was a slightly better blocker, but wasn't like dominant blocking tape in my opinion. I think he was a solid, adequate Michigan tight end that we've come to kind of see. Not a productive guy, not someone that really like ran snappy routes, or certainly not someone that showed a lot of instincts to make big plays, to be this run after catch threat. I didn't hate him. I feel like I had a pretty strong inclination of who he was as a player, as just a day 3 guy that really projects as like a balanced number 2 tight end option. But we're talking about a top 60 pick here for Marlon Klein, where you're counting on him to not just be a starting tight end, but like you take a tight end in the second round, you're hoping that's going to be like an impact star tight end. And I just don't see that pathway. Don't see the upside for him to like overtake Dalton Schultz and eventually be the tight end of the future here. So I hope I'm wrong. I hope the Texans see something I didn't with the player. But that one had to be an F for me. That's kind of a colossal reach. So many other guys I would have preferred to see them go with there. So that wraps up their first 2 days of the draft. You get to day 3 for them, and some good, some bad. I think the Fabechi Wiwu pick was really a good pick. I actually think he's definitely a better pass protector in my eyes than what I watched in Keelan Rutledge, but inversely, really not good moving forward, not a good run blocker at all. So you end up with 2 like very different style offensive linemen, in my opinion, which is kind of an interesting strategy. It's like, if CJ's getting his ass kicked, maybe you do go with Wiwu earlier than Rutledge. Not saying that's necessarily going to happen, but I am saying this was definitely a value. I saw Fabechi Wiwu as like kind of plug and play is hard to say for like a 3rd or a 4th round guard, but someone that certainly has a high floor as a pass blocker. He just has strong, sticky hands. He remembers to move his feet, which not every interior offensive lineman does. He's got an anchor, just not an athlete in the run game. But I think as a depth piece, if nothing else, that has a lot of value. But yeah, like I said, you've got a lot of guards that do have pass blocking questions, whether it's Ed Ingram, Keelan Rutledge, Wyatt Teller honestly has struggled in pass protection in recent years. So if things are really looking ugly and that becomes an issue for you, I think you have an option to kind of flip it and be like, all right, we might give up a little bit in the run game, but we can keep, CJ upright. And hell, maybe we see the first like guard by committee. I mean, if you could fuse Rutledge and Wiwu into one player, that's an all-pro guard maybe. But good pick nonetheless there. Then they take Wade Woodaz with the 23rd pick in the 4th round. This was definitely earlier than I saw him. He was my 22nd linebacker with a 6th to priority free agent grade, so pretty far down there. I do see why they like him. They love dudes that fly to the ball, hit hard, kind of that reckless, relentless pursuit style. I saw that with Wade Woodaz, just very much like a explosive north and south linebacker, but the combination of stiffness in his hips and lack of foot speed, it hurts him all over the place. Like coverage struggles. He's even kind of stiff as a blitzer to kind of contort his way around blockers. There were some missed tackles on tape. So I don't know. I saw him as a backup linebacker and definitely someone that'll be good for covering kicks. Like, I love Wade Woodaz getting down the field, lighting dudes up. So he's going to provide special teams value for sure. But I'm starting to think about specialists like that in the 6th or 7th round, not the 4th round, where I think you can find more impactful players than how I see Wade Woodaz. So that was a reach for me. I'd be a little bit surprised if he becomes a starter someday. And then Kamari Ramsey does ultimately go in the 5th round here, the first pick in the 5th round, which is literally at the precipice of what I had him graded as a 5th to a 6th round safety. He was my number 14 safety in this draft. Someone that for a while was kind of expected to be more of a day 2 pick. I certainly did not see that in his tape, and I talked about him as a not my guy in my show. I think that was the one with Mike Renner. But I talked about how I've never been so discouraged by a safety's disinterest in the run as I've been with Kamari Ramsey, which is kind of fascinating because that's actually like the total opposite of a D'Amico Ryans type of guy. D'Amico loves these guys that just play with their hair on fire, kind of like a Wade Woodaz, that reckless abandon from the defenders and maybe try to coach up a little bit of discipline along the years. But I think in this case, they maybe, if they saw the same thing I did, where the coverage stuff wasn't bad for him. He is a good athlete, and a lot of people say if you go back to 2024, he showed more coverage flashes as a free safety. But if they saw the same thing I did, where it's like, man, this guy just could not care less about the run, that's frustrating to see from any safety. They might be saying, you know what, maybe we can get him into our culture, our environment, and light a fire under his ass, get him to be interested and play hard against the run. Because if that happens, you can start to mold that with, pretty good athlete, a young player that hopefully the coverage stuff is pretty good in time. So that's to be determined if they can get that out of Kamari Ramsey. Again, this was more the range of where I saw him going, not the late 2nd, early 3rd that was talked about with him for a long time in the pre-draft process. So it's just a solid pick for me. It's not a player I'm betting on. But if anybody can figure it out with Kamari Ramsey, it would be D'Amico Ryans and this defensive staff. So I'm very much prepared. 3 years from now, we could look back on this and we say, hey, good on the Texans. They actually turned him into a nice player. But he's going to have to start by covering kicks and showing some toughness on special teams and stuff. But then they get a value, in my opinion, in the middle of the 6th round. Lewis Bond out of Boston College. Not really someone that got a lot of headlines in this draft process. He's kind of a what you see is what you get type of player for me. He's a short, stocky, technically sound slot wide receiver. Kind of like a poor man's Amon-Ra St. Brown, if you will. He can play, though. And I look at kind of like what Christian Kirk was able to do for this team last year. I could kind of see a lot of similarities there with Lewis Bond. Now, you have Jalen Noel here, so he's not going to take his job, but as a really sound backup in the 6th round that can just step in right away and fill out your wide receiver depth as a slot player, I like that for them on Lewis Bond. I actually had him as a 4th round player. I think in a different situation with bigger opportunities, I think he could be a starting slot in the NFL. It's not the best opportunity for him, though, obviously, because I really like Jalen Noel and the receivers they have here already. And then they take Aiden Fisher, the linebacker out of Indiana. It does kind of make sense with the way they've built this linebacker group and the 2 linebackers they drafted here. Aiden Fisher is kind of the opposite of Wade Woodaz. Really no straight line explosiveness at all, but a very disciplined linebacker that made it work at Indiana. Just not a whole lot of traits and upside to write home about. That's why he ends up going in the 7th round. But his tape wasn't horrible. But that's kind of who their starters are, right? You have Azeez Al-Shaair, who they let it loose, go fly, go hit the ball, play upfield. And then Henry To'oTo'o, it's not like they won't ever ask him to play upfield, but he has a little bit more of that come to me, gap discipline, make sure you're that second line of defense style. You kind of have 2 poor man's versions of those 2 players, with Woodaz being a little bit more like your Shahir and Fisher being a little bit more of that Henry To'oTo'o. So kind of different styles there. Late 7th round pick, we'll see even makes the team. And then I did like the Noah Whittington pickup, actually. hard to find guys in this running back class really worth much at all, to be honest. And we're still talking about an undrafted pickup here. However, Whittington runs really hard. He's got contact balance. He's got really good vision. I viewed him as a kind of less explosive version of what Kyle Monangai was coming out last year. And you look at this running back room, Woody Marks did some good stuff in his rookie year. I've got some questions about, his down-to-down consistency as a runner. But after that, obviously David Montgomery's here. But after that, Jawar Jordan and no one else. Like, Noah Whittington has a chance to earn some carries here, especially if David Montgomery gets injured. So, I don't think he's ever going to be a star running back. He just doesn't have the explosive traits that will get you in a spot where you want him to be your long-term starter. But can he be an RB2 and, an innings eater, a contact balance, kind of short yardage style back? Absolutely. And that's worthy of bringing into a running back room that absolutely has opportunities for guys to make this team. So I like that as an undrafted pickup for the Texans. All right, so the final grade on Houston is a C-. Certainly not my favorite draft. I look at this as a pretty underwhelming haul for where they were picking and what they could have done. I really hope Keelan Rutledge turns into a star. Like, he's a really fun player to watch, but I got to be honest about my concerns that I have with his foot speed and his lateral agility and his pass protection. The Klein pick is, as a top 60 pick, is just a really hard sell. Not really anything wrong necessarily with what they did on day 3, but didn't steal a ton of value. So, yeah, not my favorite draft, man. It's going to be towards the bottom of my list. We'll see how that one ages in time. Before we go any further, I do want to thank the sponsor for today's show, SeatGeek, the #1 ticketing app out there. With baseball season in full force, SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the MLB. They've got you covered to go have some fun, go catch a ball game, go catch a concert, or NBA, NHL playoffs in full force. Got the World Cup here in the States this year. That's exciting. So wherever it is you want to go, SeatGeek has got you covered with the best app, the best user interface. They color code every single seat. So green means good, red means bad. Just look for the green dots. You're getting the best bang for your buck. They're great at giving you images of what your seats are going to look like, so there's no surprises when you get to your seat. And you get the tickets right there in the SeatGeek app. You don't have to jump through email chains or have this frustrating experience trying to find your tickets as you approach the gate. They are the #1 ticketing app for good reason, and they've been an excellent partner to work with over the years. So thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's show. When you guys get your tickets, use code TFG10 and you will save up to $20 on your first purchase. And with that, let's get back to the video. Let's go to the Indianapolis Colts. Really like what the Colts did, man. It's hard for me to find a lot of criticisms of this draft, if I'm being honest. They didn't have a first-round pick, so inevitably the final haul is going to look like a little bit less. But for where they were picking, man, they did a damn good job. They get C.J. Allen towards the end of the second round after a trade down. That's phenomenal value. I gave that pick an A. C.J. Allen is a plug-and-play, run defense oriented linebacker. He's not the biggest player, but he plays well above his size in terms of play strength. The more I watch CJ Allen, the more I came to appreciate how strong his hands are, how good he is at getting off of blocks. For a young player, he is very smart. I want to see the zone stuff become much more consistent with him. He made a couple plays in flashes, but a lot of times quarterbacks were able to manipulate him in his zone drops. And the sideline to sideline speed, the overall range as a coverage defender, I do think is more limited, man. I do. There was some, report that he ran a 4.47 at a private workout. It feels like we get one of those every year. And it's just like, no, he didn't. No, he didn't run a 4.47. The tape doesn't lie on this player. There's a lot of examples on tape where he's trying to get those angles to the sideline, and you can see he's probably more of like a 4.65 speed kind of guy. But that isn't a death sentence on a guy. You can still be a damn good linebacker in the league. But obviously, with a little bit less size, a little bit less speed, the upside isn't going to be necessarily out of the gym with CJ Allen, but a very strong, smart, plug-and-play linebacker in a linebacker room that so desperately needed help. it can be hard to find rookie linebackers that are more plug and play. This was a really good linebacker draft. There was actually a couple of those options in this draft. CJ Allen was one of them. And I do like how he complements Akeem Davis-Gaither, by the way, who's more of a undersized speed type of linebacker. So they took care of business there, filling, in my opinion, the biggest need on this entire team. And then they fill probably their next biggest need with that next pick in, honestly, a steal of a value, getting A.J. Halsey. I didn't anticipate calling A.J. Halsey a steal when we eventually got to the draft grades here. I feel like I was pretty even in terms of where consensus was at with A.J. Halsey. I liked him a good bit. Definitely saw a second-round safety prospect. He actually reminds me a lot of Jaquan Brisker. Guy that, isn't the most sticky, explosive, fluid cover safety, but absolutely gets downhill, plays the run. One of the hardest hitters in this draft. AJ Halsey will light you up. And he does have decent long speed and adequate range on the back end as well. But as a complement to Cam Bynum, I think this plays really well in this defense. I think on the live draft stream, I was saying there's a lot of parallels with AJ Halsey and Von Bell, who had a very good role in a Luanarumo defense, the one that went to the Super Bowl with the Bengals. So he definitely fits. It had become a very good value, a exceptional value. I gave this an S-graded steal for getting a second-round player in the middle of the third round. I think this is awesome, man. I think they got just two super high-floor, physical, plug-and-play starters in the second and, on day 2 of the draft. That's really well done by Chris Ballard and the Colts. And then I really like a lot of the stuff they did on day 3, man. Jalen Farmer, I think they got him around later than I would have taken him. Super inconsistent player. I don't think you want him starting right away. He's not going to have to start here. But there weren't a whole lot of, especially interior offensive linemen, that you could have put together as good of a highlight reel on with Jalen Farmer. When things connect with him, it's incredible. It looks like Trey Smith or Tyler Smith, the way he comes off the ball, detonates guys. And in both phases, he had dominant moments, but he just kind of was down to down, play to play. A lot of frustrating moments with missed assignments or, kind of just stopping his technique, whether it was stopping his feet or being lazy. I don't want to say being lazy, but failing to get his hands inside. Just the tape was just all over the map, man. But it's there's the good plays show good technique. You know what I'm saying? He's clearly getting there. It's just you gotta get that every single play. So this is a team that develops offensive linemen extremely well. I almost said this was a steal because I feel pretty freaking confident that he can be a starter for them, a quality starter for them someday. But I didn't quite go that far, just staying consistent with the grading criteria that I use. But I do think this is a great pick. It's not like they have a huge opportunity at guard. Matt Goncalves looks pretty good, and obviously Quentin Nelson's still there. So it could be a while till we see Jalen Farmer, but hey, that's probably for the best. And if you get an injury, I think you can be really excited to see what he can do when his name gets called. And then they go with Bryce Betcher at the end of the 4th round, and I thought that was good value at a 3rd to a 4th round grade on him. So to get him at the end of the 4th, nice pick. Super low upside linebacker, but I do think he can start in the NFL as one of these kind of slower, less athletic guys that just kind of wins with his physicality and ability to break down the run and see things well. I think in short areas in his zone drops, he knows what he's looking for. He even made some plays at Oregon. So I think as an immediate backup linebacker, again, a linebacker room that was Akeem Davis-Gaither and nothing else. Not only did they need a number 2 starter, they needed some good depth as well. I think Bryce Betcher is immediately your LB3, and if you have injuries, or maybe Akeem Davis-Gaither isn't really a fit, and you want a little bit more stability on earlier downs, I think he could even get some starts in his rookie year. So I definitely agree with that pick. I thought that was a good pick. At the end of the 4th, they go with George Gumps in the middle of the 5th round, developmental edge rusher. I didn't learn until after the draft that he was I think a receiver that converted to edge during his time at Florida. So I missed out on that detail. That does definitely make me more interested in him, the fact that he's so young to playing edge. But you could see the athletic ability with him, but he's extremely slender. Still kind of looks like a wide receiver in many ways. And it's not like he's super young either. He's 23 going on 24, I believe. So you kind of got to hurry up with his development for a guy that really didn't show a ton, to be honest. But gambling on some traits there, kind of getting back to the Chris Ballard way a little bit. Like, hey, let me get one of these traitsy edge rushers. But for the most part, their draft was a divergence from their drafts of old that have not worked great for them. Chris Ballard and the Colts have kind of been the RAS team that just kind of looks and sorts by RAS score and just gambles on traits. This draft was a lot more just like taking good football players, and I think that's going to work for them, man. Like I would describe CJ Allen, AJ Halsey, Bryce Betcher, and a couple more of these picks like Caden Curry up next. All these guys are just like, they know how to play football, man. None of them are going to light up the testing numbers. But Caden Curry in the end of the 6th round, we can talk about him here. He, to me, is a plug-and-play rotational defensive end, can, defend the run. He's got a rip move. He's got some things as a pass rusher. If he gets caught out there on a drop-back situation on earlier downs, like he might be able to get you a couple wins, a couple pressures. Great special teamer as well. I think just filling in an edge rotation at the end of the 6th round, Caden Curry made a ton of sense. I even had him 4th, 5th round from a grading profile for me. So that was another good pick. And then I like Seth McGowan quite a lot in the 7th round. He was one of the few running backs in this draft that I was like, yeah, I kind of like this guy. Like Seth McGowan ended up my RB5 this year. Again, just historically bad running back class. I would wager this was even the worst running back class of all time. It's certainly the worst one I've ever seen. I can't really speak on the 1900s. Like Seth McGowan here was my RB5. He would have been like RB18 or something last year. Like that's how big of a drop off in talent there was this year. But, I compared Seth McGowan to Antonio Gibson without the receiving stuff. So he's a bigger back that has like rare movement skills for a guy that size. But he also has vision problems like an Antonio Gibson. So there's upside there to maybe be developed. He's already an older prospect. I know it's like, doesn't sound like the most appealing player. But in this running back class, I do think he had become a value here in the 7th round. And as a backup to Jonathan Taylor, I could see him becoming the RB2 for a few years here. I really could. He had some pretty damn good games at Kentucky, and when things click for him, there's a lot of traits there. And maybe you can develop some of the receiving stuff as well, which isn't really there for him right now. But I said great pick on getting Seth McGowan. And if anything happens to Jonathan Taylor, I actually think he would be the guy that gets some opportunities, and maybe he looks good with them. Maybe he doesn't, though. That's kind of who he was as a player. But they take Deion Burks at the end of the 7th round, going with the athletic traits there, betting on his speed, his movement skills, not necessarily betting on the production. He was an interesting guy where you just didn't really understand why Oklahoma didn't throw him the football more because he was getting open. It's not like he dropped the ball a bunch. Definitely should have gone before this item as a 4th round grade. And I think as an immediate backup to Josh Downs, that plays 100%. They needed some wide receiver depth. And I think Burks screams the profile of a player that has a good chance to just be a better pro than he was a college player. So great pick there at the end of the 7th round. And then they even found some value in undrafted free agency. Nolan Rucci. I actually really like Nolan Rucci. I had a 4th round grade on him. I think there were so many worse tackles that got drafted a good bit earlier than, obviously undrafted free agent, but I think he's a plug and play backup swing tackle. He's not the best athlete. I don't think he's ever going to be your forever starter, but injuries happen, and this dude is tough as hell. I thought his run block tape was really good at Penn State, and he's like got strong hands. He's got good technique. He can't move his feet all that well. But you don't have tackle depth here right now. You don't. It's Blake Freeland, who to me at this point I would view as a bust. I wasn't a huge fan of Blake Freeland, and Luke Tenuta. Like you need some tackle depth here when Jalen Travis is promising, but you don't know what you have there. And if anything is going to happen to Bernard Raymond, they're going to need someone that can step in and play. And really could see that being Nolan Rucci like this year if need be. So I think that was one of the better undrafted free agent pickups we've talked about in this entire series. And then Cameron Ball as well. I think he could get into a rotation as a run defender on earlier downs, but especially this rotation on earlier downs. They don't have any size really after their starters. Like Colby Wooden and Adebawore are kind of undersized dudes. They did sign Derek Nottie, but Jerry Tillery's in this room too. Tim Smith was a 6th rounder from last year. Definitely could see Cameron Ball giving them something for 5 or 6 plays a game, and just, let's say, be a wrecking ball against the run on earlier downs. But I ultimately gave the Colts an A for this draft. I think they absolutely crushed it without a first-round pick. Hard to be critical, really, of anything that they did. Really well done by Chris Ballard and company, which isn't always how I feel about their drafts, but I think this is going to be a good one. All right, let's go to the Jacksonville Jaguars draft, the moment you've all been waiting for. This is the draft that drummed up a lot of controversial conversations about consensus boards and reaching on players and a lot of different stuff. I mean, man, we could make a whole video about draft grades and the draft analysis industry and people's illogical reactions to people giving their thoughts on the draft. It's like we spend 4 months talking about prospects and who we like and who we don't like. And then when the draft happens, we're all supposed to just shut up and say, trust the teams. Like, ridiculous. I know you guys don't feel that way for the most part, watching, 30 plus minutes into a draft grades video here. But like, man, this definitely has been, at this point, an exhausting conversation, but I am going to give you my thoughts on this draft. And I do think this team really beat to their own drum and reached a bunch on guys that, in my opinion, had no business going in the spots that they were drafted in. And that began with Nate Boerkircher. I mean, I saw Charlie Warner, right? Like a tight end too, not the biggest guy, but blocks his ass off. Didn't really produce. He's got, 4.7-ish speed that shows on tape. Just not like a great separator or a great athlete, but does catch the ball when you throw it to him. Just not really an impactful receiving weapon and doesn't really have the size to be like a dominant tight end. I don't really get what they saw to justify making him their first pick in this draft. It's an F-graded pick for me. It is. And I think Boerkircher can be a nice tight end to Cole Strange. And look, this does give me PTSD. It's actually crazy because one of my worst draft grades reactions over the years has been what I thought about Cole Strange. I thought that was a total reach at the time, and they actually saw something in him, and he turned into a really nice player for Jacksonville, someone that I will openly admit is extremely underrated, and I was wrong about. But that's not going to scare me away from giving my honest opinion again here when they take a colossal reach, in my opinion, at the end of the second round. Now, Jags fans can point to that and be like, you were wrong about Cole Strange. I'm going to trust my front office, and that's fine. I'm just telling you what I saw in the player, and I saw a role player, not a top 55 pick in the draft or whatever this was, and not the third best tight end in this draft. Like, there's so many other tight ends, whether it is Max Clare or whether you do want that true blocking specialist next to Cole Strange. Like, go with Will Kazmarek out of Ohio State or Sam Roush if you wanted like a really nice compliment as a blocking-oriented player, because I didn't think Nate Boerkircher's blocking is better than anything he does in the receiving game. But again, he's undersized. He's 245 pounds. So really a head-scratcher on that one. And it, it came out after the draft. It's like, he was NFL teams loved him. He was expected to go later. And then Jags fans are attaching to that to excuse why the Jags should take him here. And I just can't get behind that. It's like, okay, number one, what other NFL teams might or might not think about the guy doesn't change his resume. It doesn't automatically justify taking what he was as a player and saying, yeah, that's a late second, early third round prospect. You still have to explain to me why he's worth that pick to me. In addition to that, we have no idea where these sources are coming from. Think of all of the smokescreens we get throughout the draft process. Hearing after the draft that someone else was going to take Nate Borkircher, so you had to take him with the 56th pick in the draft or whatever this is, that's hilarious, because that could be, that could have been the Rams, who have all the connections to this Jags front office. That could have been them, who wanted Max Clare, being like, knowing that the Jags liked Nate Borkircher. That could have been one scout on the Rams, like, sent a text to the Jags and was like, oh, we love Nate Borkircher. We're definitely going to take him 5 picks later if you don't. Wink, wink. It could be that. It could be the Jags themselves just trying to save face and just making something up. It could also be Nate Borkircher's agent getting something out there. Like, oh, you think my player was a reach? Ha ha, I was on the phone with whoever. They were going to take us 10 picks later. Do you realize how many times these agents are told their guy's going to get drafted at a certain spot and it ends up not happening or happening 3 rounds later? I've seen that so many times. So don't get me, you got me started, but don't get me started on that line of thinking. Like, this was a reach, make no doubt about it. Now it's on the Jags to prove to us why we were wrong about this player, and we'll see how it goes there. Just like they did with Cole Strange, with Brenton Strange. Sorry, did I say Cole Strange earlier? Brenton Strange. But then in the middle of the 3rd round, they take Albert Regis. Again, it's just early for who the player is. You didn't have a 1st round pick. You had opportunities on day 2 to get impact starters, and they took a couple of role players, in my opinion. It took a tight end 2, and you took, to me, a DT 3. Someone that's like, he's not a bad player. I had him in the 5th round, like, plug him into your rotation. He's an undersized, run defense oriented defensive tackle that's going to have a limited upside. I see something like what like Malcolm Roach has been in the NFL, and that's a decent player. You don't need to take that with the 17th pick in the 3rd round. They do need some help on the interior of the D-line with some depth. This one was far from an egregious pick. I actually gave this one a C. I think he's going to be an okay player, but you're just not maximizing the value with the pick that you had there. Now, they did make one incredible pick, and that was Emmanuel Pregnon, who ends up falling to the end of the 3rd round here. I had a top 50 grade on Pregnon. He was my number 2 interior offensive lineman. It will be fun to track how Pregnon performs compared to, for example, Keelan Rutledge, who we talked about with the Texans. I thought Pregnon was a better guard. Now, hard to know exactly why he falls. It could just be as simple as he's an older prospect. He's maxed out, quote unquote. He didn't test all that well. We know these teams can overvalue testing at times. But this is awesome. And hey, if this entire draft is a complete bust, but you end up with like a quality starting guard out of it, at least you got something there. And I think they did. I think they get a guy that could absolutely compete immediately at guard. Really good pass blocker. I think in the run game, like, he moves better than he tested. He's strong. When he gets his hands on you, good things happen. He did have a questionable amount of like mental lapses for a 24-year-old offensive lineman, and maybe that's something that teams didn't like. But like, that was really it. It was like, everything's really good with him. It's just he's older, and sometimes when he's climbing to the next level, it's like, wait, why didn't you? That was your guy. Like, why did you second guess that assignment? Or like, sometimes blitz pickup was a little bit lagging with him. But that feels rather coachable still. Even if he is an older prospect, you could still, coach some of that stuff up. So this was a steal, man. I no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is a hell of a pick by the Jags. Makes this draft look a lot better. And then they take Jalen Husky at the end of the 3rd round. And I like Jalen Husky, again, as a 5th round player, someone that maybe could crack a starting lineup as a safety someday. Inconsistent tape, but he has good instincts on the back end, good ball skills, especially when he's able to read the quarterback's eyes, see routes developing in front of him. I liked his eye balance and his ball skills. It's just the reason I had a 5th round grade on him is he's certainly not the biggest guy. He's very slender. He's about 6'1", 194, so kind of has that like lean cornerback build. He ran a 4.55. I think that shows. I think he's got an excellent first step. And, when he first breaks on the ball, like, that plays on the back end for sure. But his speed and his range does stall out pretty quickly. Ran a 4.55. It's not bad, but, it doesn't have like incredible range or anything like that. I think in a split safety defense like this, he could potentially start someday. but I did think there were better safeties available. And it just was early for how I saw the player there. Though probably a pick I guess I'm a little bit higher on than some other people. Like pretty much every pick that this team made is just getting blasted. I'm not going to blast this pick. It was early for me. Then you get to the fourth round and they're kind of right back to just like targeting hyper specific role fits on their team. Like I will say this about the Jags. They made it very clear, like our process for this draft is to find, for the most part, like unique roles on our team that we're looking to fill, which is commendable that you can identify certain skill sets that you want in your locker room. But the question from me is like how much you're investing to fill those roles. You're overpaying with a bunch of these picks on guys that can kind of be found later on. And if it's not that specific guy, Nate Borkircher, for example, it's like there's other guys that can fill that role for you too. That's why they're valued lower. It's a more replaceable, findable skill set. And Wesley Williams, middle of the fourth round here, I totally see what they like in his game. He's kind of this condensed, unathletic edge rusher, but he's a crasher for stunts. Like literally that's what he did at Duke, and that's really all he's good at with his build and his skill set. He has a really great first step. I feel like he's good at timing the snap, and he's good at just kind of crossing the tackle's face, slanting inside, and that creates opportunities on stunts for loopers. But there's a bunch of guys that can do this, to be honest. There's guys that can do that and a bunch of other beneficial things to your defense on top of that. I had him draftable in a kind of Robert Saleh style system as that defensive end that can be that crasher. Not in the fourth round. Like that's definitely early for this player for what he is. I think he's a hyper specific rotational defensive lineman that you spent, the 19th pick in the fourth round on. That's just early. They go Tanner Koziel in the middle of the fifth round there. Fascinating player. Again, kind of a hyper-specific player that's good at one thing and one thing only, and that's catching balls in traffic. And I'm fascinated by Tanner Koziel. If they really leaned into him, I wouldn't be stunned if he could catch like 6, 7, 8 touchdowns in a year, just being strictly a red zone threat. But that's really all he does. I mean, he had a ridiculous contested catch win rate. This dude has to have a basketball background. Like he gets into the middle of the field, boxes out linebackers and safeties with a 6'6" frame. 6'6" frame, 33 3/4 arms, 36.5 vertical jump. Like he high points the ball. And for whatever it's worth, in all my different categories on my draft guide, so whether it's catching traffic or speed or run blocking, whatever it is, across the board at every position group, I probably had 5 or 6 A+ graded individual traits for certain categories. I just don't go handing those out. And for Tanner Koziel, he had 2 of them. Catch in traffic and catch radius are A+ for him. He has an elite trait about him, but he's not fast. He's extremely stiff. He offers nothing as a run blocker. I don't know how you make him like a starting tight end with what he was. And he's not really a tight end too because his run blocking is so useless. So he's like specifically for like 3rd and 6 and you need someone over in the middle of the field to get a tough catch for you, or in the red zone, someone that can maybe make what's normally a 40% chance of catching the ball, make it a 60% chance. If they lean into it and really know how to use them, they might be able to get something out of them. We've seen Tanner Koziel's come along, though. I think he's one of the better, like, true catch and traffic merchants at the tight end position. Again, there's guys like this every year. Just having done this over time, it's a kind of like archetype I've seen before. Names aren't coming to my head off the top of my mind, but guys don't really bring much to the table other than making tough catches at tight end. But of those players in that archetype, I do think Tanner Koziel was one of the more fascinating ones. So if they lean into him, maybe they can get something out of him in the 5th round here. And then Josh Cameron, again, hyper-specific skill player. I had a 5th to a 7th round grade on him. That's about where he goes. So between that and Koziel, it's not like they really reached on these guys. They went in the right spots. But Cameron's a running back playing wide receiver. I'm not afraid to say that. He has amazing hands, and he's built like a power running back. He's like 6'1", 220. So sometimes corners and slot corners and safeties have a hard time getting him to the ground. But yeah, he's slow, especially for a wide receiver, creates no separation at all. He was someone that I came to appreciate a little bit more the more I watched. But when I first watched him, I was like, this guy's not draftable. Like, this guy literally cannot get open. And then you realize him making a lot of tough catches and being a handful after the catch. And you're like, all right, maybe there's a specific role in an offense that someone like Liam Cohen could find a way to get him utilized. So we'll see what plans they have for him and his very unique, specific skill set. He's Laviska Shenault, for those that are familiar with kind of how his career has transpired. So we'll see. And then I didn't get to the rest of these guys. They really went outside of the sort of draft canon universe here and found some guys that they liked here. So CJ Williams out of Stanford, just kind of an adequate physical profile. Again, didn't get to him, so we'll see what he can do. Zach Durfee, edge out of Washington, was not on my radar. Decent size, ran a 4.58. Again, we'll see if they saw something there that others couldn't. And then Parker Hughes, a linebacker out of Middle Tennessee State that did run a 4.39. So they're betting on the speed with that player. But definitely when you pair all three of those picks together, being so far off the radar, and you reach like this in the first round, it's going to provoke some thoughts of like, man, you really do kind of think you're the smartest man in the room here with this draft. Like, you are going so far against consensus on so many of these players. And I, in this case, like, saw most of these guys the same way as pretty much everybody else. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, with all the discourse about consensus boards and stuff, it's okay to go against consensus from time to time, but there's historic evidence that if you do it consistently or your entire draft is against consensus, it's insanely risky and over time is going to be bad process. And almost their entire draft, other than Emmanuel Pregnon, would have been considered like early on the consensus board. And I think Jags fans are tired of hearing that word, consensus board. And honestly, I'm tired of hearing it because I don't even think everybody fully realizes like what it is and how it should be utilized. It's the equivalent of like ADP in your fantasy drafts. It's a tool to be used to help navigate through this very unpredictable thing that is the draft. But I do think from a process perspective, there's a lot to criticize on the Jags for this approach. And now it's on them to prove that they were right and everybody else was wrong. And we'll check back on this in 3 years, right? That's the fun of this entire conversation and all this content with the draft. But they did have one undrafted free agent steal that I do want to shout out. Jamari Taylor, good vision, north and south, one-cut runner out of Virginia. There's opportunities in that running back room. I'm, just like many people, very excited to see what Byshell Tootin is going to do. I don't think he's going to get the entire backfield. But the guys after him, you know, Lakeem Allen, more of a third down back in my opinion. Chris Rodriguez, more of a short yardage goal line type of back. Jamari Taylor, especially if anything were to happen to Tootin, I think is more of a complete, you know, run any type of system, outside zone runner, especially compared to those two backups. Someone to keep an eye on for sure. But in terms of giving a grade to the Jags, D+ for me on the Jags, man. Just so many reaches, opportunities to find value. We're beating a dead horse at this point, but I can't endorse this draft. I don't know that, other than Pregnon, I don't know that they really found starting football players. Maybe Husky. And that's with 10 draft picks as well. And I know one of them wasn't the first rounder, but there's opportunities to find dudes in the draft, and I'd be pretty surprised if they did here, really. But let's get to the Tennessee Titans, our 32nd of 32 teams to give a draft grade to. Thank you for your patience, Titans fans. Let's talk about their draft. They begin by taking Carnell Tate with the 4th pick in the draft, and I kind of go back and forth between like B and A on this. I think you could go either way because at the end of the day, like Tate was a little bit further down the board for me, 14th on my big board. He's actually my number 3 wide receiver, but I have been very open about the fact that, like, look, I stack these wide receivers a certain way, but they're extremely tight, and it really does just ultimately come down to what you're looking for from a skill set perspective in these top wide receivers. And I think you could really have justified, especially if you were comfortable in the health on Jordan Tyson, I think you could have justified any of my top 4 wide receivers as the first wide receiver off the board. And I think it is justifiable for the Titans to make this pick here. And I like trying to give Cam Ward as much as you can to succeed with this first pick the next year after you drafted him. And really, the only other thing that would make sense as a better pick for Cam Ward maybe would have been like Vega Ioane. And I just don't know how reasonable it is to be like critical of a team for not taking the guard at number 4. I think we're getting to a point where that's going to become more normalized, but it still feels like that would have been a little bit more out there. And if you wanted to be more safe and not be super criticized for the pick, I think Carnell Tate was probably the way to go. So because of all that, I landed on an A for Carnell Tate, and I'm excited to see him here. Like, this wide receiver room now really rounds out well. If you just start with the starters alone, people forget Calvin Ridley is here. Ridley is the antithesis of reliability. A very week-to-week player. Drops just seem to come and go in waves with him. But as a vertical threat in a bounce-back season, not having to be this team's number 1 wide receiver, he was really good in 2024. People forget that. I think as that role, that Z wide receiver in this offense, Calvin Ridley is a great fit there. They gave Wan'Dale Robinson $20 million to be their starting slot, to provide stuff after the catch. You can disagree with giving him that much money, but when you do give him that much money, Mekhi Lemon's basically off the board for you. Omar Cooper isn't really that true X. If you're looking, you've got your Z, you've got your slot. If you're looking for that true X, Carnell Tate was going to be that guy here at number 4, and that is your definition of reliability. Generational ball skills, in my opinion, is what I keep coming back to on Tate in terms of reliable hands and winning catches in traffic. You're going to be hard-pressed to find a better resume than what Carnell Tate has done over the last 2 years there. He's a good route runner for a bigger wide receiver. He's a little bit skinnier, so he's not like your typical, like, big, strong X, but he will play that role and win in the same areas that you can ask from there. So you have a very, like, clean-cut, like, role definitions for your top 3 wide receivers, and then everybody else slots in really well. Alec Iamaner's a nice balanced, like, can kind of play anywhere. You've got your vertical, like, gadget design deep threat guy and Shamari DK. You've got a lot of pieces that make sense together, and Tate is what's necessary to bring that whole group together. So I do like this pick. I'm excited for it. I ultimately gave this an A, even if it was like borderline between a B and an A, and it kind of makes me want to bake in more like A minuses and B pluses. When I built my criteria, I kind of wanted it to be more clear cut unless there were like trade factors that can give you a plus or a minus. We'll see. Maybe I'll revisit that because Tate kind of feels more like a B plus or an A minus pick, but I landed on an A. But then you go to the Keldrick Falk pick, which they actually do trade up. So if we're talking about my criteria, like, I do have that room to, add a plus or a minus. If you trade down and then take a guy, like, you can get a plus. If you trade up, and I didn't think it was great to trade up for the guy, I can throw a minus on it. And that's what's going to apply here for the Keldrick Falk pick. I gave this a B minus. When this pick first happened, I can definitely see like what they see in the player as kind of that Danico Autry role. Falk is a whole deep dive of a conversation himself that we've had this talk a lot throughout draft season, where I think he should have bulked up and played defensive tackle. I don't think he has the athleticism to be a highly efficient edge rusher in the league. I think his run defense absolutely as a 5 technique will play. But he goes to Robert Saleh, and I see the fit, right? They've had, whether it, Michael Bennett to the original origins of the Seattle 3 defense, but Eric Armstead right here, the guy they signed, in John Franklin Myers. They just paid a lot of money to play this role. I see like their vision for Keldrick Falk, right, is to play early downs on the edge and then help as a pass rusher on the interior. But the more I think about it, it's like, man, you just gave John Franklin Myers a lot of money to do that. So did you have to trade up to take Keldrick Falk? Is that redundant? I think I've got some questions there on a player that I just generally am not that excited about. I did think Keldrick Falk was a true second-round player. I just don't know that the pass rushing stuff is ever going to fully come along with him. But I do see the scheme fit. So I guess I'm just going to kind of leave it there. Like, I think this was a decent-ish move. And that's B- to me, with the trade up and everything factored on top of that. I could see him 3 years from now becoming a decent player in that role, right? But is that fully worth everything they're paying to get him here when you already have John Franklin Myers? That's my commentary on it. You know what I'm saying? So we'll see how his development goes. Very much a controversial player in this draft process. But then at the end of the second round, they trade up again and they go after Anthony Hill out of Texas. And in this case, I don't mind the trade up. I don't, he was the last of the interesting day two linebackers for me with all the other guys having gone. And I do think his developmental upside here with Robert Saleh is quite high. This isn't like incredible value or anything. This was just a straight up B graded pick for me. He's going to have to get better as a run defender, and I think they can get him up to speed with that. He played off the wing at Texas, played very much just like a run and chase, weak side backer type of role, blitzed a lot. His zone stuff, his coverage stuff is pretty good. But again, playing more of an NFL-style linebacker role between the tackles, they're going to have to get to work with him, and he's going to have time. I don't think he necessarily starts here with Cody Barton and Cedric Gray. We'll see. Maybe he does, and they just want to have him get those live reps and learn by fire. But yeah, I think he's a little bit more of a boomer bust type of linebacker prospect. But worthy of the pick here at the end of the second round. So we'll see how he develops. But then you have to go all the way to the fifth round, largely because of those trade-ups they were aggressive to do. So you can kind of see, you make two aggressive trade-ups, you can kind of see where the middle of your draft thins out when this team, could have probably used some of those picks. So you don't get to pick until the fifth round. You take Fernando Carmona out of Arkansas. Decent late day 3, physical, scrappy guard that has really abysmal traits. I think he's got a decent enough floor as a backup. I did think it was a little bit early, but not enough to really call it a reach. I had a 6 to a priority free agent grade on him, but having not picked for so long, not the most exciting start to your day 3. They go with Nicholas Singleton at the end of the fifth round. This was definitely the range I had on Nicholas Singleton, and it just blew my mind that he ended up my RB7 and that I'm sitting here saying this was a good pick. Like, this running back class really just plays tricks on my mind because I don't think he's a good football player, and I would bet against him becoming a good football player. He had some of the worst vision I've ever seen from a college running back prospect. But a lot of these other backs in this class had really bad vision and a lot of things wrong with them. And Nick Singleton does offer some stuff. I think his pass downs potential and honestly like impact to step in and do some good stuff on third downs right away, it's actually pretty good. Like, he is, for all the things he struggles at, he's a pretty good pass blocker, he's a pretty good route runner, and he has pretty good hands, and he's really crazy fast. So I do think third down role makes sense for him, and I think as a return man, that track speed can play. So as an RB3, a late fifth round pick that can do some stuff for your team while you just pray that he can start to see things as a running back. I love the analogy with Nicholas Singleton, and I workshopped this with Garrett, friend of the channel, Football Analysis YouTube. For me, it's like Nicholas Singleton. It's like you have Saquon Barkley on your Madden team, but every time the ball is snapped, you have to turn the screen off, and you have no idea where you're going. That's who Nicholas Singleton is. So if you can fix that, you've got a great value. But again, late fifth, Nicholas Singleton to plug into a room with Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. I think there are similarities from a physical skill set standpoint between Tony Pollard and Nicholas Singleton, especially. So we'll see where it goes for him. I actually thought that was a good pick, which for all the things I said about Nicholas Singleton, very surprised we're sitting here at the end of the draft and saying, yeah, good pick, Nicholas Singleton. But then they take Jackie Marshall out of Baylor. Unfortunately, I didn't get to his tape. Definitely profiles as a solid type of defensive tackle, though. He likes athletic, smaller guys. He's 6'2", 293, ran in the 4.8s. So you're kind of getting the archetype, the solid archetype there in the 6th round. So decent enough swing at that. Pat Coogan, I did watch. I just didn't get to finishing the write-up on him. Very experienced, played guard, played some center, backup type of guy that just lacks a lot of traits. Kind of a standard 6th round offensive line pick to fill out your depth chart. And then kind of a fun pick, not stealing value or anything like that, but Jaron Kanak out of Oklahoma. He was actually a linebacker like a year ago and switched to like a tight end H-back role. So he's going to be a fullback for them, but he's ideal for special teams because he's actually got speed. He ran a 4.5. He knows how to tackle, having played linebacker. And he can get into the mix in your heavy personnel looks. So I definitely thought he was draftable, and he does get drafted right around the range I had him. So solid pick there. They did get some exciting names in undrafted free agency. Bishop Fitzgerald was actually my number 13 safety. I liked him better than Kamari Ramsey. I just thought he was a better coverage player and tried harder. And he makes sense in a split safety Robert Saleh defense. So in a safety room that has opportunities, at least to make the team, certainly, I wouldn't be surprised if Bishop Fitzgerald beats out like Jarek Reed, Sanauzi Kane, Kendall Brooks, and, makes it as an undrafted free agent, and we can see where we go from there. Latrell McCutcheon, I thought, had the developmental traits worth gambling on. Was surprised he didn't get drafted. I wonder if there was bonus stuff with him, whether it was injuries or off-field questions or something, just because he seemed like a pretty straightforward, size, length, speed cornerback prospect that didn't have horrible tape. I thought for sure he would get drafted, so get him into the mix there. And then Emil Wagner, one of these players that was super inconsistent, a lot of frustrating moments on tape, but very traitsy athletic guy that had some good plays on tape. So again, bring him in and see if something clicks. I thought he would get drafted. So all those guys were pretty good values as pickups for the Titans there. So I ultimately go with a B grade on the Titans draft. As we broke down, I think it was a very solid draft, not like necessarily my favorite, but not one I'm overly critical on. I think development with those two defensive players, Robert Saleh targeting, especially Keldrick Falk, Anthony Hill, how those guys develop, both are very like boomer bust types of prospects. So how they develop is going to ultimately define this draft. I think we know what they're getting in Carnell Tate, and that's very good. And then day 3 was just kind of okay for me. So we went with a B grade there for Tennessee. And that's going to do it. That is every team's draft, every single pick analyzed. About 8 hours of content reacting to the draft. So thank you guys so much. If you enjoyed today's video or all of my draft grades videos and all my draft content, please do finish this off with one final like there for the 2026 draft season. Let me know your comments down below. Where do you think I'm right? Where do you think I'm wrong on my analysis of these teams' drafts? And I will see you guys very soon. Within a couple days, I'm going to be reacting to my 2023 draft grades to see how those aged. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that. And then after that, we're getting started on deep dives, which is going to take, the first one usually takes me about a week to produce because there's a lot of prep work that goes into it. So we're looking mid-May for our first deep dive in my favorite series of the year. So very excited. Got great content just around the corner. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, 2026 draft season. Been real. I'll see you soon, though. Cheers.